On the 6th of July 2013, in the early hours of the morning, a freight train which had been parked for the night on the railway tracks near Nantes in Quebec started to move.
On the 6th of July 2013, in the early hours of the morning, a freight train which had been parked for the night on the railway tracks near Nantes in Quebec started to move. Slowly at first, and then with greater and greater speed, it began to roll downhill towards the nearby town of Mégantic. The train consisted of 72 tanker cars, each one bearing a full load of crude oil. With nobody on board and nothing to stop it, the train barreled towards the sleeping town, which was about to experience one of the worst rail disasters in Canadian history.
Is there any argument against paid leave? Yeah, it's Warren Buffett, want to make more money. That's it. Like literally in the short term too, not even in the fucking long term, because like shit like this happens and then you lose all that money. In the short term, want to just fucking make as much money as possible. And I want to also fucking hope that like nothing disastrous happens as a consequence of that.
Mégantic was founded in 1884, and even during its very first years, the railway was a crucial part of its economy. The town was situated at the point where two different railroads, that
if I was a right-winger, what would I say against paid leave? I would say that this is destroying the economy, that these workers just got a comfortable 24% pay cut at a time when most workers in the United States of America are suffering under liberal rule and liberal establishment when there's 8% inflation and they're not even getting any sort of pay increases. I would divide and conquer. I would fucking pull out some of the highest, most expensive fucking contracted railway workers' salaries and make it seem like the entirety of the fucking railway workers get paid $200,000 a year or some shit like that. And then I turn around and say that they're lazy and they're selfish and they're pitting the working class against one another. There's already 8% inflation and now they want to make it 20% inflation. What are they doing? I mean, it's almost like they're a part of the fucking anti-Brandon squad. They want to tank the economy so bad that Americans will finally realize that only under Republican rule can we thrive and survive. Look at how great it was under Trump's rule. I would say, what else? Yeah, I would bring up examples of small business owners who are going to be devastated by this. I would bring up poor people who are going to be devastated by this because, like, you need chlorine to fucking, clean your water supply, and the railroad workers are the ones who are bringing that to your towns, technically. I would say that it's a matter of a national security disaster. I would reinforce the idea that they're lazy, selfish, and also, more importantly, replaceable. Okay. What else? I mean, that's pretty much it. That's like pretty basic stuff. Like, these guys have no consideration for their fellow workers who are not going to be able to heat their fucking homes because 24% increase in their salaries wasn't enough. That's what I would say. Damn, you're starting to convince me? Yeah, except that is idiotic propaganda, because ultimately what truly matters is the fact that there is another side to this conversation which the media is never fucking addressing, which is, if you ask me to fucking buy a Salem sticker one more fucking time while I'm literally having a conversation about striking railway workers, I don't know what the fuck that's about. I am going to literally put you and tie you to the fucking tracks like a villain in a cartoon, okay? Holy shit! Shut the fuck up! Don't forget, workers versus workers. Railroad workers want more money that you can't afford a loaf of bread. Yeah, I already said that. Anyway, the real way to fucking avoid this disaster, okay, which will have a disastrous impact on the economy. That's precisely why they're doing it. A work stoppage is supposed to be done when you have leverage, not when you have no leverage. That's the entire point of a fucking work stoppage, okay? So when you have that fucking leverage, what you're supposed to do is use it and force the other side's hand. And an adequate media, or rather a pro-labor media, which does not exist, unfortunately, with notable exceptions like Jonah Furman, Alex Press, and the like, okay? But a pro-labor media would cover this on the other side, okay? They would look at this situation and go, it's kind of wild that companies won't even fucking give $600 million, which is nothing to them in comparison to the profits, record high profits they've been raking in year over year since 2010, okay? And they can't even fucking use a fraction of that to pay back profits that these workers created for them, by the way, okay? And they can't give them a fraction of this back for human dignity, something as like profoundly human, like allowing people to avoid going into work when they're sick, when they're covering multiple thousands of metric tons of fucking gear that they're passing through all these goddamn towns, okay? These people should never be sick. They should be in tip-top shape, okay? They should always be working to the best. They should be always working at maximum efficiency.
Of the Canadian Pacific Railway Company and the Quebec Central Railway Company met on their route across the continent. And it was considered so significant a hub that Canada's first Prime Minister even visited at one point as part of a campaign to champion the railways. In the town's more recent history, the railway is no less significant. Trains form a crucial part of the town's economy, delivering raw materials for several factories and carrying away the finished products they manufacture.
I want to write questions on Twitter about what journalists could be asking. You know what I mean? Questions that they could be asking. Fucking bosses rather than union leaders and bosses. You know what I mean? Not a thread, but it's just so basic. It's so fucking basic, you know? Booming railway strike. Why won't you concede to 7 paid sick leave days if the work spell economic disaster? Why do you want a sick worker to control toxic waste? Metric tons of toxic. Why do you want someone in control of metric tons of toxic waste? Possibly sick on the job. Ask people if they want a barista sick and how a $4 cup of coffee is much more impactful than a 4,000 ton train. Yeah. It's just record-breaking profits since 2010. That is insane. You think they could help their workers by giving them the bare minimum, like cola? They're not going to do that. Rail crash caused by engineer taking cold meds.
Here, products like furniture and particle board. The town is also a hub for tourists, with people visiting from all over the country to enjoy the vast and beautiful Lake Mégantic, from which the town gets its name. On the 5th of July 2013, a freight train was making its way east across Canada, travelling from Newtown in North Dakota to an oil refinery in St. John, New Brunswick. The train consisted of 72 tanker cars, loaded with 113,000 litres, or
How do you respond to the people saying that if the companies concede to the workers will just ask for more? Not a view I hold. I don't know who those people are, but the reality is that when workers ask for fucking more, which they always should, there is a level that you can get back that is reasonable. Because ultimately, if the workplace is no longer a viable business or a viable industry, then they will no longer have a job. Okay? It's so understandable that workers will always ask for as much as they possibly can get because the other side is refusing to give it to them. At the top of the hour, I'm giving you a 3-minute ad break now, okay? Starting tomorrow, 3 minutes at the top of the hour, 1 minute at the middle of the hour. And you're like, oh, fuck, I don't want that. That's a lot of ads. Well, guess what? In order not to see that, all you need to do is subscribe, which you can do for $5 or for free, okay? It's literally all motherfuckers in the chat who are subscribed going, oh my God, that's so many ads. Red CXY, thank you for the 20 gifted subs, allowing 20 people to no longer see the ads. Here's the 3-minute ad break now.
30,000 gallons of crude oil.
BS, thank you for the 5 gifted subs.
As well as not one, but
False
5 locomotives to provide the power necessary to drive it.
Bill Vog, thank you for the 10 gifted subs.
Lac Mégantic.
Bro, I spent an entire month saying that the ad density was going to increase to 4 minutes an hour, okay? And motherfuckers are still like, what? 1 entire month, 30 fucking days of being like, we are going to increase the ad density. Ad density is supposed to be increased. And people are still like, what? What? For an entire month, I've said it. The Raging Copper, thank you for the 10. Turbo Killer, thank you for the 5. X Mixed Reviews, X, thank you for the 5. And Black Kakarot, thank you for the 5. Melon Lemon Jello, thank you for the 5. And Grouchy Vegan, thank you for the 5. Bill Vog, thank you for the 10. Monk XO, thank you for the 5.
Night was falling. The lone engineer on board, a man named Tom Harding, was scheduled to leave the train on the main track at Nantes overnight, so that it could be picked up by another driver in the morning to continue its journey. He might have been glad to leave the train, as it had been experiencing technical difficulties for much of its route. The lead locomotive was spewing excessive amounts of smoke. Before leaving the train, Mr. Harding had to make it secure. To do this, he applied multiple handbrakes on all 5 locomotives, and checked that they were sufficient to hold the train in place. An important step given that it was parked on a very slight downward gradient. This done, he contacted his employers, the Montreal, Maine, and Atlantic Railway. He told them about the excess smoke, and after some discussion, they agreed to leave the train where it was and deal with the problem in the morning. Mr. Harding left the site in a taxi, bound for the hotel in Mégantic where he usually stayed when working this route. Before the next morning could come, a small fire broke out in the smokestack of one of the locomotives. Although the cause was not known at the time, it was later revealed that the fire and the excess smoke which had come before it were down to a bad repair job that had been done on an engine several months before, a repair which had now finally failed. Passing motorists on a nearby road saw the flames and called the fire service. They arrived on scene and, following standard protocol, switched off the locomotives to prevent fuel circulating to the flames they were trying to extinguish. With this done, the flames were promptly put out. Firefighters then called the MMA railway and advised them of what had happened and what had been done. MMA maintenance workers came out to the train and confirmed that it was safe before everyone left the scene. It was around 1:15 midnight on the 6th of July. The train was stationary on the tracks, the locomotives switched off and the fire extinguished. To a casual observer, it would have seemed that nothing at all was wrong, but in actual fact, all was not well. The train was being held in place by two types of brake. A handbrake which physically secured a brake shoe against the wheels, and an air brake which used air pressure to do the same thing. Now that the locomotives were switched off, the compressors which provided the air for the air brakes were also switched off. Air was leaking from the system and not being replaced. Slowly, the pressure in the air brake system dropped until it was no longer sufficient to hold the train in place. Several minutes after the last firefighter left the scene, the massive train began rolling downhill. With nobody at the controls, the train gathered more and more speed with each passing minute. It blasted through level crossings, leaving drivers puzzled by the speed of the train, as well as the lack of engine noise or lights. By the time it reached the town of Mégantic, it was travelling at around 105 kilometres, or 65 miles per hour.
Christ.
Far too fast for the section of track which passed through the town. It approached at breakneck speed with no...
By the way, I'm not saying this happened because like workers were asleep on the job. I'm showing this to you so you understand what can happen if workers are sick and working on the job and not at 100%, because this is an example of what happens when, you know, some shit goes south, or if scabs are working the railroad. That's another thing, you know?
No lights and no warning except for the sparks and smoke which spewed from its wheels. Near a level crossing close to the town's main street, the train derailed. Tanker cars smashed into one another in a chaotic jumble, spilling volatile crude oil. This formed a burning river, which swept through the downtown area in a manner that some bystanders likened to a tsunami of fire. Those who saw it coming tried to flee, with some even leaping from windows to make their escape, but in many cases the flames simply moved too quickly to be outrun. Buildings were swamped, streets engulfed in fire, and sewers and basements flooded with burning oil. One of the worst hit locations in Mégantic was a popular bar known as the Music Café. The building, which was still packed with patrons at the time of the disaster, was completely consumed. Only those who fled immediately on hearing the crash
47 people
survived.
killed.
Some patrons, mistaking the sound for an earthquake, took shelter within the building rather than running. They did not survive. The emergency response began almost immediately, with more than 100 firefighters flocking to the scene. They were presented with an incredibly complex task. Rarely had any of them faced a fire that had quite so much fuel at its disposal. And, being liquid, this fuel spread in unexpected ways, flowing down into drains and erupting into basements or cellars several streets away. Despite a confusing and dangerous situation, rescuers coordinated extremely well. Firefighters worked to block off drains and create fire breaks, then used foam to tackle the flames. Water was used to douse tanker cars that had not yet exploded. Among the people working across the vast area of the disaster was Mr. Harding, the engineer who had left the train on the tracks in the first instance. He had seen the flames consuming the downtown area from his hotel, and had called his bosses to tell them what was going on. It had come as a terrible surprise to him to find out that it was his train that had rolled down into the town and caused this devastation. Leaving his hotel, he joined a small group consisting of firefighters and workers from local industries, who used heavy loading equipment from the factories where they worked to move the few tankers and locomotives that were still on the rails away from the fire, preventing further devastation. Meanwhile, the local hospital...
Bro, look at this. The entire downtown area is done. Exploded. On fire. From what I understand, the air brakes, like part of the air brakes according to the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, which looked at whether SPTO played a role in the accident. After looking at the circumstances of the night and the derailment, the investigation was not able to conclude whether having another crew member would have prevented the accident, which they didn't have. Okay. Cost-cutting measures in this regard, and also with respect to not like improving the train itself was part of the reason. As an environmental assessor, train accidents are no joke. I see so much environmental impact from trains due to human error. Like one time, a train was filling up with acid at a factory. The hose wasn't secure. Whole town had to be evacuated because of the vapors are deadly within seconds. Trains need operators that are at 100% and not sick. Yeah. A picture from the above as the explosion happened and as the fire was ongoing. But hey, 47 dead and half of downtown erupting in flames is a small price to pay for the profits of the executives in that regard. You know what I mean?
Was put on high alert, but ultimately received very few casualties. Few of the injuries caused by the disaster had been in any way survivable. All in all, 47 people were killed in the disaster, which also destroyed more than 30 buildings, displaced thousands of residents and hundreds of businesses, and all but leveled a huge part of Mégantic. The flames took 2 days to extinguish. Once they were finally out, an investigation was launched. It was found that many factors had contributed to the disaster. Prominently, Mr. Harding, the train engineer, had failed to apply enough handbrakes before leaving the train. He had used 7 handbrakes, but should have applied more than twice that number for a train of that size and weight. He had made another error by testing the brakes while both the handbrakes and the air brakes were applied. He should have switched off the air brakes for the test to ensure that the train could be held in place by the action of the handbrakes alone. 3 men, including Mr. Harding and 2 other railway employees, were put on trial, charged with 47 counts of criminal negligence causing death. While there was considerable public anger about the disaster, most of it was not directed at these individuals, but instead was saved for the MMA railway. It emerged that the company had provided minimal training, had ignored complaints about the safety of its track, had used outdated tankers, cut corners on repairs, and in many other ways demonstrated an extremely relaxed
Oh man, that's so crazy. Who would have guessed, dude? That's so wild. Who would have guessed that could have happened? Hey, America, take notes.
Attitude towards safety over the course of many years. Given these factors, all 3 men were eventually acquitted. Legal proceedings began against the MMA Railway, which subsequently announced bankruptcy and laid off most of its employees. Outside of the MMA Railway, many changes in procedure were brought in by railways across Canada and the US. Stricter rules to cover how trains must...
This is why I always say, dude, what do I fucking say? Regulation is written with with blood, okay? Not written with ink, it's written with blood. All rules and regulations that you see right now that you consider to be a part of the fucking nanny state being overbearing or whatever is written with the ink of the dead workers and the dead customers and the dead people, okay? Why is it written with blood? That's kind of weird. Well, it took this to fucking change the rules around quality.
Must be left if left overnight, how they must be maintained, and to determine which trains and which routes can accommodate dangerous or flammable substances. Most railway companies now require at least 2 engineers on a train carrying dangerous materials, and insist on a stringent series of safeguards whenever a train of this type is left overnight on the tracks. To this day, the damage to Mégantic is still visible. A huge part of the town has been lost, including the beloved Music Cafe bar, the local library, and several other civic buildings. Some have been moved and reinstated elsewhere. Contaminated with crude oil, the downtown area that was the epicenter of the disaster remains relatively desolate. Trains continue to run on the tracks which brought disaster to the town, although, at the request of residents, for at least one day most years, the 6th of July, no trains run through town, as a mark of respect for a community mourning its dead.
This shit is... It's no joke, man. It's no joke. And that's why these people understandably want time to sleep and time to rest and fucking sick leave, paid sick leave. They wanted 15. Congress can't even give them 4. Or Congress can't even give them 7. Okay? Another unrelated story. Let's take a look at Ronald Reagan. Does anyone have a good video about the Ronald Reagan air traffic control, the 11,359 air traffic controllers that were fired on August 5th, 1980?